Go. So we'll call the land use hearing for commissioners of June 18th, 2025 to order. And the first item here is a public hearing for ACM 155 comprehensive plan amendment and AZM 156 25 zoning map amendment through Mount Canyon Farms as the applicant and owner. And I will start by reading the open.
Sorry, can you also, and we're gonna do the two hearings simultaneously. Can you open the hearing for both?
Okay,
Please, that's
so,
what we did. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
okay, yes. So the other action that we'll be taking will be ACM 157 25 comprehensive plan amendment and AZM 158 25 zoning map amendment through Mount Canyon Farms is also the applicant and owner. And so I'll start with reading the opening statement for this land use hearing. Persons who wish to provide testimony may do so orally or in writing. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, also known as LUBA, on that issue. Please sign the sheet in the back of the room or make a note in chat if you're participating via Zoom. If you'd like to present testimony, please speak only when identified by the chair and begin by giving your name, spelling your last name, and your address. If you have exhibits for our consideration, please provide a copy to staff. If you'd like to request the board to hold open the record or continue the hearing, you must make that request before the public portion of the hearing is closed. So I'll call for any abstentions or conflict of interest. Any? And we'll start with the staff report.
If I had a conflict, that would kind of make my afternoon nice. He looks at me. No, okay. Thank you, Chair. For the record, Tamara Mabbitt, I'm the planning director. And if it's suits the board, I will be pretty brief because I understand the applicant and their team of experts will be giving you a really thorough presentation on the application. As noted on page 4 of your packet, and also for the record, we're having some internet connection issues, but it looks like things are up and running now. If the system goes down, I guess we'll pause and wait for it to come back up. It does, this internet access working off a couple of hotspots has limited our ability to show maps on the common screen. So I might be referring to pages in your packet. Normally when I give a staff report, I'm referring to a map, a common map that everybody's looking at, and I'm not able to do that right now. So on page 282 of your packet, it shows the 2 subject parcels. And the reason we're doing both hearings simultaneously is one is contingent upon the other. So it's either approve all or not approve all. And the applicant is 3 Mile Canyon Farms LLC, and their consulting team and legal team is here in the room with us today. The Planning Commission held a hearing on April 29th and approved the application. There was 1 abstention due to a conflict of interest. Chair Ekstrom did not vote, but the motion was passed 3-1. Typically, the reason there's a large gap in between the hearings is with larger zoning or legislative amendments, I usually give a buffer in case the Planning Commission wants to schedule time. This seemed to be really straightforward, so Planning Commission dispensed of that action all in April. So we've had some gap in the time. So technically the application is to amend the comprehensive plan designation from agricultural for 967 acres and space age industrial of 331 acres to industrial, and to amend the county zoning map designation from exclusive farm use and space age industrial, and then to general industrial for a total of 1,298 acres located west of the Boardman Airport. And that's the main site. As part of that application package, your materials include an exception to statewide planning goals 3, 11, and 14. The goal 11 exception is for water and extending urban service water to the site. The proposal also includes a companion piece, rezoning approximately 1,623 acres owned by the same owner, not contiguous to this site. So I'll just pull this out of my book here. So the rezone area, what we're referring to as the upzone area is this 1,298 acres. And then the downzone area, downzoning it from space age industrial to exclusive farm use. The configuration of the downzone area changed between their original application and the planning commission action. And the reason was that previously it was an area that looked a little bit more like an L, and that area that was removed and replaced with another area to the west was because part of that downzone area is also subject to a long-term conservation easement. So the thinking around the downzone area, the applicant, it's not required in our code, it's not required in statute or rule. Their idea, oh, that's nice. That's their map. Thank you.
Tamara, could you pause for a moment?
Sure.
Could we have someone on Zoom confirm that they actually can hear and respond to us? Just, I would like to verify that.
Dan, I'm gonna unmute you. Can you see and hear and can you talk to us?
I can see, I see the screen, it's got the map. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I think you're live.
Thanks.
Awesome, great. I didn't want to get too far and find out. We just have people who couldn't hear.
For sure.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Okay. So where was I? So the downzone area, again, as I mentioned, is not required by our code or statute. But the applicant was aware of a precedent that was set, and they just also thought it was part of the package they'd like to present to the board. They can explain more what they were thinking there. It's also land that's actively farmed, and they have every intention to continue to farming it. It's a higher quality farm ground, certainly than the area that they're trying to upzone. One last piece about the upzone area. That one segment in the light lavender purpley color is space age industrial. Everything else is going from exclusive farm use to general industrial. And all of that also has a limited use overlay zone. And what that means in summary is that the rezone and the exception is for a single use, and that's an EXA scale data center campus. So if that campus is not developed, the allowed uses would revert to the uses allowed in the current zone before the zone change took effect. It also, one of the benefits of doing that is it narrows the scale of the materials and the findings they have to evaluate, changes primarily the traffic analysis and economic analysis. So you could imagine if they were not applying the overlay zone, the traffic analysis would have to project all sorts of potential uses that are allowed in an industrial zone. And that's a much more extensive analysis, probably double the size of this. And then the same is also true for the exception standard. So you take an exception for a certain use based on the unique attributes of this particular site. Like I said, I was going to be really brief because the applicant's done a really nice job. One addition to the record, it's a letter dated March 4th, 2025, a letter of support from the city of Boardman. We never tracked down receiving a copy. Their attorney, Megan Lynn, brought it to our attention. We do have a copy, so the city manager from Boardman forwarded it to us. It's a letter signed by Paul Kiefer, and it's a letter in support of the application. I did email electronically the Board of Commissioners that letter, so that's also now entered into the record. And Dan says we don't have to take formal action to enter a new item into the record as long as it's entered. With that, I'll pause. Are there any questions?
Anything from you guys?
No, not at this moment.
Okay, so if it's okay, Chair, I'll just stop my part of the talking, and the applicant has a much more dynamic presentation than I might make.
So as long as there's no questions for staff, we'll open up the public hearing portion, and we'll start with the applicant or those that are in favor, and we'll start with those that are in the room. So again, just as a reminder, please give your name, spell your last name, and give your address for the record.
My name is Megan Lynn, and I'm attorney for 3 Mile Canyon Farms. And address is Northwest Coos Street in Portland, 1120.
And for the record, spell your last
Oh, sorry, Lynn, Lin. Okay, so we are here again on behalf of 3 Mile Canyon Farms. You've heard from Tamara a little bit about our application. We're very grateful for her proactive engagement. Her critical feedback through the process, I think, has led to a better final work product, which is before you today. As she noted, 3 Mile is seeking to rezone an area that is west of the Boardman Airport from SAI and EFU to general industrial with a limited use overlay to only allow for data centers. And it's also seeking to rezone an area south of Boardman from SAI to EFU to preserve farm uses. Okay, thank you. Next, yes.
Can you do want to introduce yourself?
Oh,
Sure. Hi, I'm Ian Sisson with Mackenzie. I'm a land use planner. Last name is spelled Sisson. Address is 1515 Water Avenue, Portland, 97214. Sorry.
the business app. Okay, so next, so you're gonna hear from 3 Mile, and you're also gonna hear from the technical consultants on this slide who helped prepare the application materials. We've got a soil scientist, land use planners, economic impacts analysis, and transportation planning. And actually for transportation planning, we have Janet Jones, our engineer here to answer questions, but she won't be proactively presenting. Feel free to interrupt with anyone at any time with questions. And I'm going to start with 3 questions. So first, where are we in this process? So we're here following a planning commission's recommended approval of this application. And as Tamara noted, at the planning commission hearing, a couple things happened. DLCD submitted a comment saying that this down zone needs to be part of the approval regardless. And your planning commission requested to modify the down zone area to protect all actively farmed land and to exclude a habitat conservation easement. So we'll take a quick look at those two. This is the old down zone area. It was 1,605 acres, and the area to the north where it looks like there are no pivots, that's where the conservation easement was. Next slide. And this is the new boundary. It's slightly larger at 1,623 acres. And as you can see, it contains it's entirely composed of active pivot irrigation pivots. So what you have before you is a proposal that is consistent with DLCD's comments and the Planning Commission's recommendations. And another just important point about where we are in this process. The board's approval of this application does not approve any actual development. Right now, this is just a land use policy decision that makes this site available for future applications for data center development. Any actual development will have to go through site plan review, which I think you're familiar with. And that gives full opportunity for notice and comment from public and agencies. And this is where specific development details, like specifically where water will go, industrial water waste, sanitary, traffic mitigation, all of that will be presented and reviewed against the criteria in the Morrow County Code. This is also when the county would have, site plan reviews also when the county would have additional opportunities to impose development-specific conditions of approval. Second question, do we need more data centers? And the answer is yes, the demand for large data centers is here and it's actually increasing, and this region is well positioned to attract this growth. For 3 Mile, the key was finding the right site while meeting their core mission of preserving agricultural productivity on their farmlands. And this application allows them to do that by proposing this land swap that protects their actively farmed land while meeting the growing demand for data centers with a site that's already proximate to a lot of necessary infrastructure. So finally, third, why this site? So as you can see, the site itself, the 1,298 acres, is already close to a lot of industrial uses. It's close to the Boardman Airport. It's adjacent to another hyperscale data center that's immediately to the east. You can't actually see it, but it's to the east of the SAI zone. And 3 Mile determined after looking at their their extensive land holding in Morrow County, that this site was most suitable for industrial development and least suitable for crop production, and poses no potential adverse impacts or incompatibility issues with adjacent uses. And the fact that it's already close to so many industrial uses means that very short extensions of water, fiber optic, road will be required just to connect kind of where that little box was over to the site. And this site will rely on the same transmission lines that are already going to be extended to serve the other adjacent data center to the east. There are also significant efficiencies with consolidating data center buildings on a single larger site like this. So a helpful analogy is a wind farm. A single turbine can produce power, but it doesn't really make sense to do a single turbine. A single server can store data, but it makes way more sense to aggregate so you can leverage the necessary infrastructure like transmission towers and power lines to a single site like this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to 3 Mile to give their portion of the presentation. Is Scott, let's see, is Scott Neal on? We might have that on an email.
Do you have Sam's phone?
Does it look?
Sam Harvey might be.
Sam's, I'll take it.
Okay, here we go.
Take one for the team.
They have another attorney in here.
Oh, okay.
Greg Harris, HARIS, 75906 Stream Road. Boardman. Greg Harris, I'm the farm manager. At 3 Mile, so I manage all the farming operations. From 3 Mile standpoint, as you heard, for us, really, this is just a business decision. When we look at we've got limited water rights on 3 Mile. We can only develop 41,000 acres, and we're close to that now. This piece of ground will never be irrigated. I've walked this ground. We know what we're going to develop in the future. This is rocky ground. It's marginal grazing ground at best. In my mind, as we're sitting here, as we talk about upzone and downzone as a farmer, I actually consider you an upzone, not a downzone personally. But it's, by doing this move, moving the industrial ground up there opens up ground for development that's not good farm ground. I've lost good farm ground to a data center on some ground that we lease. So I lost 125 acres of some absolutely beautiful farm ground only because of the way it was zoned. It wasn't the best place to build it. It just happened to have the zoning on there. So that's really what we're trying to eliminate here. And, from us for business, it makes the sense to do it. And it doesn't make sense to have that zoning on beautiful farm ground that we want to continue farming on. So in my mind, we're protecting farm ground with this change. Happy to take questions on farm ground of the move or.
You look like you have a question, Gus.
I look like I have a question, yeah. No, sorry, I guess. So something that just has occurred to me at this point is that, we'd be moving that down zone ground into EFU. But if that was the only ground that was really protected in terms of farming and everything else around it could be industrial, is that something that would hypothetically at some point in the future become an issue if that space age industrial were to be industrialized? Like, just, is that section capable of being independent on its own? This would be what I'm curious about.
It's hooked in the irrigation system that you see all around there. It's one irrigation system to your point. We do have some wells that have the ability to run off that, but it's having a portion of the farm as kind of a separate standalone actually isn't. When you look at the history of this farm, everything on the east side of 6 Mile, at one point was a separate farm. And so with different ownership, the front side of the farm at one point it was a long-term lease, double T's, Taylor's had that, and was ran as a separate parcel. So you know, it is something that could be ran separately, just much like an irrigation district would or something like that.
Thank you. Just curious about that.
Excuse me, Matt. Wi-Fi's up, Steven says, but should we just do what we're doing and try to, instead of making the switch over?
I'm fine with continuing.
Okay.
I
If
mean,
we go down, we'll go back to the main system instead of off of the hotspot, so.
it might be as easy as, oh,
Sorry about
it's
that.
covered.
This usually happens at the wrong time.
And one other thing on this ground, like we've developed, there's a vineyard, we put in new vineyard on development lines and we did potholes and different things in that area. Like we've determined it wasn't, it's just shallow, right? I mean, it's got rocks the size of basketballs to Volkswagen things, so. So that's really the main reason. I mean, it'll never be suitable for agricultural or irrigated ag, even vineyards.
Thank you.
So next we have Phil Scholes. He's our soil scientist, and he'll talk a little bit more about specifically the soil types that are on both of those areas and their agricultural suitability based on that analysis.
Would you like to advance this? Sure. Or is this?
Yep. Go ahead and click and it should advance. I'm not sure where to point it exactly. There you go.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Phil Scholes. I'm a consulting soil scientist from Portland, Oregon.
And again, just
Oh,
for the record,
thank
for
you.
your last name. please.
Yes, Scholes, Scholes. My address is Post Office Box 2100, Portland, Oregon 97208. I was asked to come out to these properties and determine what's their land capability. Land capability is a rating system that has been used for a long time, where we rate soils from basically no limitations to many limitations. So a class 1 and 2 soil, for example, often is referred to as a prime ag land, and class in Oregon, particularly the Willamette Valley class 1 through 4 are considered high value farmland. And then outside of the Willamette Valley, there's sort of some qualifiers. It needs to have been in production since '93 to qualify for high value. And this land was brought in, I think, around '96 to 2004. So my purpose was to come out and determine, with the site that they want to upzone for development, what kind of capability does it have, and then also look at the downzone area and same thing. What we found on the, pardon me, before I finish, go to the next slide here. I came out to the sites 3 different times, and each of those, my field study involves essentially going around the property, augering or digging holes down to either bedrock or down to 4 to 5 feet. Deep soils are correlated to essentially be high capability type of soils, and stuff that is very shallow down to 20, 25 inches generally rates very, to a low capability type property. The one pivotal issue in the rating system is irrigation. If it has irrigation already plumbed into the property and being used, it tends to rate the soils much better, and those soils that don't rate much lower. Mr. Harris just indicated that he doesn't have irrigation out to the upzone property. So under the very, very best circumstances, you can potentially end up with maybe a class 4 or 5, but with irrigation, maybe it gets better for that. There are other limitations in our land use or our land evaluation system. Just generally the climate for this area, very arid, high winds makes the soils easily erodible. Those sort of factor into limitations. It's impossible to end up with a class 1 or 2 soil for this area, just given sort of the climatic conditions alone. So the upzone property is got 2 different soil types mapped for it. The Natural Resource Conservation Service, has generally sort of estimated the different kinds of soil types. And the northern part of it, has a lot more rocks to it. So it's listed as being a rock and outcrop complex. It just simply means that the amount of rocks out there are just so numerous, they really can't sort of tease out that from a mapping point of view. The soil, when we could, auger down to there, it was sandy loam textures. We had a moderate amount of rocks in the upper part, and then we usually hit bedrock down at anywhere between 10 inches and 24 to 30 inches below the surface. Because of that shallow depth, it means the soils become very droughty, meaning that the water storage in the soil just basically evaporates out of it. There's not long-term water storage in it. And it's relatively speaking, it is a hard scrabble kind of ground to work with, just simply because of the amount of rocks in there. In contrast to that, we have the down zone area, which is mapped with a couple of different kind of soil types. One of them has some limitations. That's known as the Kohler soil. It's got a hard pan layer at depth, usually 30 to 40 inches below the surface. That often is not a limitation for agriculture use when you have irrigation. In other words, the kinds of crops that are grown out there, corn, wheat, onions, alfalfa, and so on, given 30 or 40 inches of soil to grow in, that layer deeper down doesn't impose any kind of sort of severe limitation to it. The topography is a little bit flatter out there. There's a lot less rocks out there. From a farming point of view, it's pretty nice stuff to work with when you have the irrigation water to it. There's been a little bit of touch upgrading that's been done, but overall, it rates substantially better than what we had on the upzone property. So when we look at the soil mapping, we see here on the slide here that the north of the upzone property, the northern part of it has class 6, 7, and 8. Those are the three most limiting types of land capabilities. So a class 8 is essentially so rocky that not really even getting cattle to graze on it because they're just so little able to grow. And 6 and 7 are severely limiting. The little E that we have on the end of those just simply means that the sandy type of soil is easily eroded given the kind of winds that we get in that part of the county. There are areas that have class 4 in it, but they're very small little pockets. There's a term out there called biscuit scab land, where you have essentially a little bit of soil surrounded by a very shallow, rockier kind of soil. This is sort of a variation of that kind of soil. And so for the most part, you can't really sort of farm just these little mounds surrounded by very shallow soils. So overall, it's got a very low rating. The upzone, the down zone area is got the same kind of climatic limitations. It mostly rates as a class 4E, and it's just simply that flatter ground, deeper soils, less rocks to it. We never found any kind of bedrock within the upper 4 to 5 feet of the soil. And just the examination of what kind of crops they're growing there. They're getting some high value crops on this property that you would never be able to do on the upzone parcel. Overall, both parcels qualify as agricultural land the way the state of Oregon defines it. Just simply having cattle on the property for a particular period of time is enough to call it agricultural land. But neither one, upzone or downzone, is considered a prime ag land. The upzone parcel, as mentioned, is just severely limited by its rockiness, shallow soils, and the downzone area is deeper, less amount of rocks, and essentially has irrigation to it, which gives it, that rating of 4E. All right, that's it.
I'm next.
Yeah,
Wait.
can I answer any questions for anyone?
So is your conclusions, are they different than what the NRCS ratings, if I were to go look at it right now, would it be the same or would it be different?
They're similar, but since the ratings were done when they published the soil survey, that was actually before the farming began by 3 Mile Canyon in the first place. So it shows lower capability across the board. But once the irrigation was added for the down zone parcel, it's actually a much better rating than it originally had. We're looking at it in a much more myopic way for this kind of analysis. So that, for example, the northern part of the property that's got a lot of the rock outcrops you see while driving along Interstate 84, we're actually having a more severe limitation rating than what is showing up in the soil survey.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have. Thanks.
Sure.
Bill. Okay, again, I'm Ian Sisson. I'm a land use planner with Mackenzie. And our role in the project was to help compile the land use application and prepare responses to the review criteria in the Morrow County zoning code, as well as the Oregon administrative rules that apply. So as Tamara and Megan introduced, part of our application is a request for some goal exceptions. And the approach that we're taking to those goal exceptions is what's called reasons exceptions. So we have to have reasons to be able to qualify for the requested exceptions. And Megan talked about a few different things that are being considered in this response to those criteria. And one of them is that there's demand for data centers and that demand has been increasing. Obviously AI, we've been hearing about a lot, and that's driving demand in the industry for additional computing power. And there's a land need to build out additional data centers. Oregon has established itself over the last decade plus as a significant data center market with good land and availability of the infrastructure that's needed for data centers. The pace of growth in this region has been about 200 to 300 acres of land per year of data center development, and our economists are projecting demand for about 3,000 additional acres over the coming 10 years. One of the industry trends that we've observed is an increase in scale of data center campuses. And so what you see a lot around Morrow County, Umatilla County of late has been what's called a hyperscale campus, where you have about 100 acres and maybe 4 buildings or so, million square feet building area, and then some space for water treatment and power substation, things like that. So there is a trend happening nationwide and I think across the world where they're aggregating campuses onto a single site. And so we're calling those exascale data centers, or they're also referred to in some of the literature that we've included in the application as gigawatt scale, based on the amount of power that they are served with. So these tend to be larger sites. Advance my slide here. Of 800 to 1,500 acres. Developers look for flat land with limited environmental constraints, such as hazards or sensitive natural areas, and then proximity to existing high capacity transmission lines and access to water supply. And as Megan mentioned, this idea of aggregating onto a large single site comes with some economies of scale that the data center developers and operators are looking to leverage. So that covers everything from the planning of the facilities to the building of the facilities and then to the operations, and then also has the effect of reducing limited external impacts. So if you think about having multiple dispersed sites, each of those sites will have impacts to its surrounding areas. Whereas if you consolidate into a single large site, you're only having whatever the external impacts are on a more limited area. So why this site is a great candidate for this type of development: it responds to this emergent demand more efficiently by consolidating, and it also meets the demand more effectively. Again, from planning and construction and operations to extensions of utilities and external impacts and reduction of productive irrigated farmland. And again, as Greg and Phil explained, upzoning this site to industrial to allow for data center use does not take away any productive irrigated farmland. Here, I will show you, here's a diagram showing the existing road access in orange. That's Tower Road to Boardman Airport Lane. And then a short green segment there on the map represents the necessary extension to serve the site with vehicle access. So only a really short extension necessary here. And for utilities, the blue dashed line represents a water line that's currently being installed. that would serve the site, and then the red represents the power transmission lines that have been approved but not yet constructed. And as Megan mentioned, those will serve an adjacent data center campus just immediately east of our site. And then here we have put together a conceptual plan for what development of the site could look like rather. And again, this is not a development proposal, but just to give you a sense of how the exascale data center campus could look and how it could fit on the site. We wanted to show that to you. And finally, as part of our justification for the goal exceptions, the Oregon Administrative Rules require an analysis of possible alternative areas for the type of proposed development. And essentially, our burden as the applicant is to demonstrate that there are no reasonable alternative areas for our proposed use. So we established a study area that covers Gilliam, Morrow, and Umatilla counties. It's about 1,300 square miles. We limited the study area to land that's within 10 miles of existing high capacity transmission lines, as that's one of our essential needs for siting an exascale data center campus. And then we used GIS data to analyze what was within that study area. So we looked at zoning that allows for data center development. We looked at land ownership and parcel sizes, and then again, proximity to transmission lines, as well as things like natural hazards, floodplain, landslide. And then what we did, I'll show you the map here. We highlighted several candidate areas and then took a deeper look into the feasibility of placing an exascale data center on those sites. And what we found ultimately was that there were no reasonable alternative sites, and that generally was because of existing development or not enough land area. Again, we were looking for about 1,000 acres. Or there were some areas that we looked at that were not zoned appropriately for data center use. So again, the conclusion of the alternatives analysis was that there were no reasonable alternative sites, and our conclusion was that our site is the best candidate. Next, we have Jerry Johnson from Johnson Economics to talk about our economic analysis, but before that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. So I'm really curious because I'm sure when we get to the developmental phase that when we are in that stage of negotiations, that if we bring up something and we say something along the lines of, well, we are aware that there are no reasonable alternatives for where this could go, that's something that we might want to have in our pocket. And I'm just curious that if the developer would agree with that and how you would perhaps respond to something like that. Given, is this really that there is no other reasonable period in this area? This is it.
So the way that I would respond to that is the alternatives analysis doesn't require detailed development feasibility analysis for each individual area. So there is there's sort of higher level filters that we can use to rule alternative sites out. Like again, the zoning designation, the amount of land area, the proximity to transmission lines and availability of power and water that's needed, topography, natural hazards. So, we don't need to do a test fit of a specific development for each alternatives analysis to meet the burden under the Oregon Administrative Rules. And I think what you're asking is, once we get to a point of site plan review, in which case, this land would have already been placed into the general industrial zone with the limited use overlay. So, I mean, at that point, I guess there's no requirement to look at alternative areas post zone change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So whoever you have up next.
Sure. Jerry, are you ready? have him.
There he is.
There he is.
All right, so I'm unmuted. All right. All right. Hi, my name is Jerry Johnson with Johnson Economics. We're located at 621 Southwest Alder, Suite 605, Portland, Oregon 97205. Our office prepared a economic impact analysis of a hypothetical exascale data center campus to give you a basic understanding of sort of the dynamics of how these work. These are fairly well understood, although the scale of this one is quite large, at least the hypothetical one. We took a look at a 16 building project similar to the one that Ian laid out on the in his layout. About 250,000 square feet for each building, 4 million square feet total building area. There's an electrical substations, parking circulation, mechanical, HVAC, a lot of other improvements. You assume the development timeline was 8 years, 4 buildings every 2 years, with an estimated total investment of $8 billion. We know to characterize these are typically very high capital investments when they come into a community, and that's what we were modeling. And these are in current dollars. So I can get the next slide. If you take a look at the jobs, there's 2 areas of jobs we take a look at. First of all is construction jobs. The construction jobs are during the construction and setup of the facilities, basically averaging about 800 jobs per year. Those are full-time equivalents, may not be the same 800 people throughout the year, but different trades at different times. So basically over 6,000 full-time equivalent jobs over the 8-year construction period. At operations, we expect 560 jobs on site when this is fully constructed, and usually an average of 35 years per building for a building life. The jobs would be both in operations as well as maintenance, ground security. The employment quality is quite high. Average total wage and benefits for on-site employment is estimated to be over $100,000 per full-time equivalent per year. And these jobs will support an additional 500 additional jobs in the community through secondary and induced benefits, which is primarily buying equipment, buying supplies off-site, as well as recirculating the money into the community from the people who are employed there. The total economic impact when this thing is completed would be just under $500 million annually in economic impact. And that would include power, water, maintenance, staffing, your indirect and induced employment. So for the community and for the county, it's a fairly significant impact on an annualized basis going forward. And again, the assumed shelf life of these buildings is 35 years. We also took a look at the fiscal impacts, which may have more interest for you. We assumed a strategic investment program, which means there are some limitation on the taxes, particularly for the personal equipment. We assumed a 15-year property tax exemption, but there's significant revenue remains in years 1 through 15, so it still kicks off a pretty good amount of revenue to local taxing jurisdictions, and the taxable value goes onto the rolls after the expiration of the property tax exemption. And by 20th year, we expect cumulative tax revenues, locally captured cumulative tax revenues, around $300 million. And roughly a third of that would accrue to Morrow County and another third to the school district. So on a fiscal standpoint, we expect that they're largely going to be taking care of most of their costs on site, or even their off-site costs would be assumed by the development. But the property tax revenues and locally captured tax revenues would be fairly significant. And that's what I have. So I'm happy to get into the details, anything you want to ask about. Again, it's a hypothetical development. We don't actually have details of an actual proposal yet, but this is trying to be consistent with what we've been showing in the entitlement package.
No questions on that.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks.
Right. So that concludes our presentation. This is a map to show you what it would look like post, if this application were approved. You see that the site itself would be rezoned to industrial. And there's actually a limited use overlay over that allows for data centers. And actually, I should clarify, it also allows for for farm uses. So if a data center doesn't show up, farm uses can still happen on that site. And then there's now instead of the light purple SAI, there's the green EFU designation on the down zone area. That's it. If you have follow-up questions, we also have our traffic engineer here for traffic related questions, but we're all happy to answer anything else.
Chair, can I just add, so the traffic analysis addresses goal 12, but as Megan said, at the time of development, prior to development, as part of their site plan review, they'll do a real-time traffic impact analysis based on the underlying traffic conditions and the projected volume on the entire campus or on a proportionate basis.
Yeah, and so at that point, we'll be providing very specific information around staffing levels, access, that'll address safety and all things relating to traffic. It's both a condition that is in our application, but it's also a requirement of the Morrow County Code. I think we included in our condition of approval that analysis is going to include an initial scoping that will include input from ODOT and from the county. Oh yeah, a missing scope of analysis. And part of the reason why this got drafted the way it is that we actually met with Public Works, we met with the county's traffic engineers, with our traffic engineers, ODOT, Boardman Fire, and everyone felt like this was the appropriate time to review what mitigation would be appropriate in the context of an actual development.
These are the same as on page 65 in your packets.
I guess I've got a follow-up question, and this may more be for Tamara, but for goal 10 for housing, this project hypothetically doesn't have anything to do with that. But if we're talking about a potential of, so operations of 560 jobs and then a potential 500 additional community jobs, and that's 1,000 jobs. And if these people have families, let's just double that just to make it straightforward. We're talking about 2,000 more people in Morrow County, and we don't have enough housing for that. So how do we appropriately plan for something like this and say that this doesn't affect housing when it absolutely is going to?
So I'd have to look to see at your findings on goal 10. My initial response is that it's not a direct impact to housing, but it clearly has an indirect to housing. So I can find the language for goal 10. Would it be all right if Megan gave her response? So the response to goal 10 is on page 29. So, and their finding, staff agreed, was that the proposal in and of itself directly does not affect housing, while development of the site will increase the demand for housing. The proposed amendments and rezone have no direct effect on Morrow County's compliance with goal 10.
Yeah, so I think from a technical standpoint, that's probably accurate, but from a practical policy standpoint, your concern, I think, is valid. And we've, I think, seen this in other communities as well. And I think there's probably a variety of solutions that different jurisdictions will take up. Either it's, partnerships with hotels we've seen use of smaller homes. We've seen more built out RV parks with even with small modular structures. So I don't think there's a one size fits all solution, and housing, as you know, is a pretty big issue right now statewide and certainly in this region. So it's a valid concern, and one that I think is raised likely in a lot of different applications. And this one isn't, like, as you said, isn't directly about housing, but I think it's a good one to consider.
So would it perhaps be more appropriate if this reaches a developmental stage where that would be something where we would want to bring this up? Or is this?
So again, I think, well, I agree with Megan, the technical answer for the first part is it doesn't directly affect goal 10 and housing. The way it would work, the way Oregon system, if you will, is set up is if this is approved, I think an adjacent city could use the projected growth in part to justify an expansion of their urban growth boundary. So you justify your, oh, good, I'm getting
That's
nuts.
exactly.
Efficient.
Yeah.
The
That is
answer.
how the system
Okay,
sort of is
that-
set up.
Yeah, yeah, it is a bit of a, as comprehensive as Oregon tries to be, it's a bit of a disconnect, but that's how the system is set up to work. I don't know how we would condition it. If we could, we have some latitude to impose conditions since this is a legislative action, less latitude when it comes to the site design review, and that would go in front of staff and or planning commission, not the board. Again, the explanation isn't perfect, but that's how the system is designed to set. We hope that the public's listening and the market responds. And maybe nearby cities, and I know both cities are looking at.
So
UGB.
on that, how far away how far away does somebody have to be before they're not nearby anymore? Because, I mean,
Oh. I
at
think-
what point is this like,
Mhm.
well, we could use this as justification for having a really large amount of growth throughout the area, or is it only gonna be like Boardman and maybe Irrigon? Or how far could this potentially reach?
I think you could go to Arlington, I think you could go to Ione and Lexington, you could go to Umatilla and Hermiston. If it's within your, depends on how you are defining your market analysis. So Ian or Jerry can tell you, or Megan or Steve, if your market analysis for a UGB expansion, for example, you're looking at a travel shed, a typical commute pattern. It's not unusual in a rural area to travel 30 to 40 miles. I think this would be well within the market to justify an expansion. I'm getting more nods, but feel free to, thanks, feel free to add to what I said.
It's probably everywhere, but Pendleton frankly might be the outside edge.
But as for freeway miles,
Even that.
yeah, I mean, you're not too much farther past Stanfield to, 15 more miles and you're in Pendleton.
Okay.
But I do think it would set the stage for lots of cities to do that, and Pendleton would love any excuse to expand their UGB.
Okay, well, Pendleton's not part of my constituency.
I know, no. But Ione and Lexington and Hefner, well, especially if we had the Ione Boardman Road, have to say that for the other Mr. Peterson I know. I think absolutely. And as the crow flies, you could take the other highway down to reach that. So there's your employment base. What would it be? 30 minutes from Ione to get to the site?
Summer. Yeah,
Maybe-
sure. In the summer, if we know where the sheriffs are and they're not on that.
I
road.
see, okay. Oh, maybe 45, okay.
But
Closer to
it is,
Lexington.
I mean, my mother worked at Boardman High School for years, so I mean, it's totally doable.
Okay.
But, yeah, that was, thank you, was what I wanted to hear.
Now, if this were a state energy facility siting council review, they would ask for more, just digressing a smidge. Although the outcome of their decision is not much different than what we have here, is technically you don't tie those immediately, you just come up with some reasonable explanation for how the housing market will respond.
Any other questions for the applicant before we move on to the next group? I don't think so.
Can I just clarify? I think it's important to note on the slide, part of their expectations is you would anticipate a SIP and a tax abatement agreement. That's not part of this decision though.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be,
Hypothetically modeled.
okay, yep, thank you, just for this. That's probably for the public's edification as much as anything else in the room. These would be the decision makers on that, but not part of the land use decision. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we covered the applicant. Is there anybody else in the room that's in favor of this application that wants to speak? Seeing none, we'll go to those online. Is there anybody online that's in favor of this application and would like to address this? If so, please use the raise your hand feature. Not seeing anything, we'll move on to the next category, and that'd be anybody that's opposed to that. We'll start with anybody in the room that's opposed to this application. Not seeing anybody, we'll move to online. Is there anybody online that's opposed to this? And again, use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to say something in opposition to this application. Not seeing anybody that's neutral or wants to make any comment at all in the room or online. Not seeing anything. We'll close the public testimony part. And any further questions for staff or anything else we want to?
So close the public hearing
we
and
clo-
testimony?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Makes our job a little different, yeah.
I don't have any further questions for staff, no.
Do you want to have any discussion about the conditions? Those are on page 63 of your packet.
I can't get mine to
Oh,
load. So,
I will share mine.
you did 63.
Oh, I did. Well, sorry, page 65 of that. So there's conditions 1 through 4.
Yeah, I saw these, yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't have any questions. I think they're good conditions.
So my comments are gonna be maybe some edits in materials.
Okay, which one in particular?
Page 4 of the application is 13 of our packet,
Page 13 of your packet.
but maybe page 4 of your application or your packet.
So that's the clean copy of the findings on page 13.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
page 4 of the findings.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
And the top paragraph there,
Mm-hmm.
it appears that the last sentence is a repeat of the sentence directly above it.
I think that's right.
Maybe it's just said for emphasis.
We could also, maybe the intention was to say the Board of Commissioners held a second public hearing on July 2nd. I think that's what we were doing.
Both of them reference June 18.
Right, yeah. So we'll strike it. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll fix that, yeah.
Next one is page 17. The number in the packet. And under response, the second sentence down, and it's towards the end of it. And it starts with it, but does not limit the bases. I think that the bases should be with an I instead of an E.
Response. The first response, the second response.
Yeah, the first response right underneath there, the second sentence. So this page, Timmer.
It's page 26. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. I thought you said page 17. Okay.
On the bottom.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I'm looking at
Sorry.
packet page. Okay. Looking at packet, not page 26. EASES. Okay. Okay.
And you want packet page or the application?
The findings.
So 45 on top, 36 on the bottom.
Okay, you bet. Well, we number the packet so that everybody's looking at the same thing. So that is, that's easier for me. Okay, page 45.
Goal 1, citizen involvement. So it'd be the 1, 2, 3, 4th line down, county court. And we change that to Board of Commissioners.
Sure.
And then page 62 up on the top, 53 down on the bottom. All 3 agricultural lands. 2, 3, 5, 6. 7th line down. And the sentence starts, thus the down zone area. I'm wondering if the word is should be inserted there.
Sure, makes it, yeah.
Just
Add
very
verb.
minor edits.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's what I have.
Well, at 800 pages, we didn't do too bad. Okay.
No, that's not bad at all.
And only 4 editors, 2, one law firm and one planning office. Okay, we will make those changes. What was that?
Impressive found it.
Yeah,
Okay. So, what, any other questions or anything?
I don't have
Yes.
any other questions. You have the specific language, my computer's not connecting. Do you mind making the motion?
So
Yeah.
I know that on page 8, we had a ordinance that so we need to approve that or,
so what we're proposing is that you approve the application based on the application's findings and exhibits. And then today would be the first reading of the ordinance, and 2 weeks from today would be the second reading of the ordinance.
okay, so what page would we go to?
Is there a specific number on the ordinance? or we just
Oh,
say-
yeah, ordinance number, it's on the top right, so your packet page would be ordinance number ORD-2023-6.
So do we need to just read that by the title or?
Title only.
It should be 2025-6.
Yes.
though. Is this?
It should be, thank you. Thank you. That'll be cleaned up for your packet for 2 weeks from now.
So again, I just need to make a motion to,
So our recommendation is to approve the application findings and exhibits. And for both, well, actually the combination, so both applications, both the upzone and the downzone area. And to, unless you read the, adopt the ordinance, unless you guys have some other language.
And the ordinance is ordinance 2025
Dash six. Mhm.
-6
okay, so
What do you like, Valerie? -6?
I think I'm on -2 for ordinances. I'm 1 second.
And the second and amended final one would be 2 weeks from today.
So I will give this to start with, to try if I understand the process right, under the recommendations of the Board of Commissioners. And so I'll vote to approve the ACM -165 or 155-25 and ACM 157-25. The application and findings as presented with the minor corrections as noted.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then the same action for the second set for ACM 157-25 and AZM 158-25.
Okay,
So the numbers you read were these two, so then we should also do those. So the upzone
Okay,
area and the
okay.
downside area, so it's really 4 different actions, 2
Okay.
different parcels.
thank you.
Mhm.
So I'll make the motion to approve the application and findings for ACM 157-25 comprehensive plan amendment, AZM 158-26 zoning map amendment as presented with any corrections as noted.
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Can I ask Dan a question? Dan, and is it okay if they read the adopting ordinance by title only and then they do the same in 2 weeks?
Yes. Yes, typically that's how it's done. The alternative is too painful to contemplate, title only. And if there are any changes coming into this or the second reading, you would read those changes in full but still read the ordinance by title only.
So a second motion to read this ordinance by title only, correct?
You could wrap it into the motion, move to adopt ordinance XYZ by and read by title only, but that's the gist of it. No one is going to read this ordinance in full.
So Valerie, do you have ordinance number for us?
Yeah, I have ORD 2025-02.
We've adopted 02, or this would be 02?
This would be 02.
Okay. Okay.
But we're not moving to adopt it yet. That would be at the second reading.
No, you do adopt it today.
Okay, you adopted it. Okay, all right. I move to adopt ordinance 2025-02.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. So that's it for today.
Felt like a big day, so yes.
Okay.
Dan, anything else that we need to do? Stephen, Megan, anybody? Make sure we dotted our i's and crossed the t's.
I think
A
that
lot of-
covers it.
Thank you. A lot of advanced work in this one. Seems almost anticlimactic to wrap it up in an hour, but no complaints.
We could, no.
No,
No,
make-
no.
Hush.
You can belabor it.
Yeah.
We could have read it in full.
Next
So-
time you show up in person, Dan.
Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Chair.